Okay, we are on week 2 of Context for Learning. So you did your intro and you did the first full investigation, which was day 1 and 2 in the booklet. And now, week 2, we're just taking the third day in the curriculum and spreading it out over all 5 days, adding in a few extra little pieces so that it makes sense. And this is always going to happen because Context for Learning is usually meant to be like an hour block, and we have 30 minutes, give or take a few minutes for transitions, right? So all that is to say, in the Context for Learning booklet, day 3, these are the pages you read, pages 21 through 26, and that gives you the whole week, okay? Now, with that said, I'm a little bit torn about how I broke up all these pieces over the 5 days. And so you have a little flexibility, right? If you want to make the mini lesson take this whole time and then develop the context and then investigate here, do the math congress here. If you wanted to add a little poster making, I don't know that that's fully necessary. You'll see in the context. We're just extending the turkey, which is why they don't have you doing it. But just you have flexibility. What you're always going to have flexibility, in fact, within the week. What you won't have is flexibility like at the end of the week. In other words, like this all should happen by the end of the day Friday, and how it paces out might be different. In addition to the actual cycle, develop the context, investigate, math congress mini lesson, we're going to, math congress, we're going to add an extra mini lesson. It comes from actually day 4 of the unit. And we're going to add a constructed response and discussing the constructed response and going over the constructed response. All of that's laid out for you in these PowerPoints, right? So, day 3a, right, starts with a number string, mini lesson, whatever you want to call it. But they do ask you in the curriculum to first set up a table thinking about cars and tires. And I think this is an interesting way to plant some context for all these 4 facts that you're going to be doing. So, in other words, you have a conversation here about like we're about to ask you to do some mental math, and all the mental math is going to have 4 in it because I'm thinking about a car with 4 tires. And so you can see in this table, like one car has 4 tires, and you could even draw it out if you want to really quickly, right? 2 cars has 8 tires. You could ask class, like, why would that make sense? 4 cars has 18 tires. So you're laying a bit of a foundation here. You're planting some seeds so that this number string is a little more independent. And then kids are working these problems and sharing how they know. Now, in the Context for Learning booklet, if you read it, okay, they talk a lot about how we can build from repeated addition to the doubling, and that we can start to notice patterns. So I really encourage you to take the time to read all this. I'm not going to read it for you because I feel like specifically here it's really it's pretty clear. But what I would say is think about whether or not drawing a picture at all would be helpful, because I think here, if I draw 3 times 4, right? And some kids might say that, right? If I want to do 6 times 4, it's another 3 times 4, right? And I can kind of see that 6 times 4 is equal to a 3 times 4 and a 3 times 4. So it's equal to 12 plus 12. Now, that's just a notion for showing something. Your job is not to like invent ways to do it. Your job is just to write what they explain, right? So, hey kids, what's 3 times 4, right? You call on someone 12. How did you know it? Some kids might say they just memorized it. Fair enough. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, what's 6 times 4? Again, some kids might memorize it, but you could say, if you didn't know 6 times 4, is there any way you could use 3 times 4 to get 6 times 4? And then, of course, what do we notice about the answer to 6 times 4 compared to the answer to 3 times 4? And that's going to tee them up then to, okay, 12 times 4, which is one they're not as likely to have memorized, right? 14 times 4 is really interesting. 13 times 4, 16 times 4, and 7 times 4. Now, they teed you up earlier with cars and tires, so use that as well, right? Like here I had 3 cars with 4 tires, now I have twice as many cars. And if you're hearing crickets and people can't explain, you could say, does the cars help us? Now, I do want you to kind of be careful because I can imagine you taking 30 full minutes. And I'm not sure you want to do that because you do have this context, right? Which is, let's go back to the turkey. And this time, just like we had cars and tires on a table, I want to make a table for my turkey so that I would know, right, how much all kinds of different pounds cost. And then you're going to do just the first 2 just to help them see how to fill it in. And then you're like, okay, now it's your turn. Do the rest with a partner. And so they just get to work. That's that first day. Mini lesson, develop the context, get started. The next day, they're working on their problem. There's not anything for you to really say. It's work time. I think it's helpful to ask them to remind you what they were working on. And I do think if somebody comes up with a really great idea, give them a piece of paper, have them write it down so you can put it under the doc cam, right? Like, you do want to hear explanations and thinking. But it's not the same as showing your work for every problem. That's not what we're doing. We're not practicing for the park right now. We're practicing. No, we are mathematicians doing mathematics. So think that through as you go along. And then the next day, back to our turkey, right? Have your Congress. So you've seen how different people solve, and you're going to have them share out, and you're going to work this table together. I've given you some extra food for thought to really push that conversation if kids are like, no duh, this is fairly easy. At this point, you've moved from whatever you saw the first day that they were doing the turkey dinner to formalizing it on a table, right? Like, if before, when they first solved this, they were going through and doing $1.25 plus $1.25, this table is really encouraging them to kind of move away from that line of thinking, right? And use doubles. Maybe use partial products, who knows? Okay, so then the next 3 days. The next 2 days of that week. I call it 3D because we're not moving on to the 4th day in the context. But really, we're getting away from what day 3 really was. I picked the mini lesson, for example, from the 4th day about juice boxes. We're still doing a number string to develop that use facts we know to find these other facts. And then they're given a constructed response. That's their work that day. The following day, you go over the constructed response, right? Let them read what you wrote back to them. You've looked all the constructed responses over and written a little something back about how to get better. Discuss their answers. Oh, and then you know what? I'll add a slide here. Give them time to fix their answer and turn it back in, because I think that's always a really important process. And that's the week. Now, I have one last thing to talk to you about. When we met and started to talk about context for learning, I showed you this platform that has tons of ways to see videos about the units. So if I click here, I can see the big dinner, I can see the teacher's lounge, I can see so many of the ones that we're going to do this year, and all of them have an amazing amount of resources in terms of just overviewing the math and all the different pieces and reflecting. They do skip around, right? So like, for example, if I'm clicking on supporting the investigation, I might see an example of her supporting the investigation on the first day, and then I might see them, later randomly doing a math congress on the 6th day. So it skips around a bit, but it's super valuable, and I would really recommend that for this week, you click on Exploring Mini Lessons. I think it's useful to hear, not so much this video, although if you're interested in like how he describes the structure, that's great. But listening to him explain his math in this video, like the math that he's expecting kids to already know versus what he doesn't expect them to know, and how he's gonna like support into that is really interesting, and I think matches up exactly with where our kids are at, even if you have like one of the most struggling classes. So that's interesting. And then he goes into the other number string that we do that week, and talks about those. So anyway, you have this resource now, and so what I want you to do is I'm going to you're going to go to this link. Sorry, let me get it for you. Up here, I'm going to put it in the website underneath where it says, our thing. And when you go to this link, it's actually automatically going to autofill the registration code, although that's the registration code. And you just fill it in and create an account using your KidBC email address. And then
it's 1 o'clock.
Oh, you will automatically be able to access this platform. And so I'm going to ask you all to do that, please, as part of watching this video, since I managed to get this video to be less than 15 minutes long by a lot. Woohoo! All right, great. Thanks so much, guys.